Hey, everyone, welcome back. We always love to go deep on the big trends in AI, and especially with all of you following along. And I know a lot of you are working in this field too. So today we're taking a look at this video essay that's making some waves, even among, well, the experts like yourself. It's all about the acceleration of AI development, and some of the arguments it's making are, well, pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I've seen this one making the rounds. It's definitely sparked a lot of discussion in the AI community.
Yeah,
A lot to unpack there.
for sure. For sure. One of the first things that jumped out at me, and they really hit on this early in the video, is this graph showing AI benchmark performance across all these different tasks. And it's not just going up, it's practically a vertical line at this point.
Right, and that steep curve, I think, is what's really grabbing everyone's attention. It does seem to be suggestive of a real paradigm shift.
Right.
Maybe moving beyond the incremental improvements we've been used to and into something that feels much more exponential.
It really does feel like something's different now. And they talk about this idea of synthetic data too. So instead of AI just relying on, all the data out there on the internet, it's starting to generate its own data, which is, that just seems like a whole other level.
Yeah, synthetic data is kind of a game changer. It allows us to sidestep a lot of the limitations of traditional data sets, which can be incomplete or biased or just not large enough to train really sophisticated models. With synthetic data, AI can essentially create the information it needs, which could lead to much faster and more efficient learning.
It's like AI is bootstrapping itself, which is both fascinating and kind of unnerving.
Definitely. There's a lot of potential there, but also a lot of unknowns. It really challenges us to rethink our assumptions about how AI learns and develops.
For sure. For sure. And the essay uses this interesting analogy to describe this shift. They call it the math sandbox. So the idea is that you have these algorithms playing around in this closed system of mathematical rules. And once they hit a certain critical mass, it's like they can just keep generating new data and insights without needing a lot of input from the outside world. Almost like AI is on the verge of becoming self-sustaining.
The math sandbox analogy, I think it's helpful for conceptualizing how AI is increasingly operating within its own world of information. But the idea of a critical mass, it's intriguing, but we also have to consider the potential limitations. Because self-generated data can be incredibly powerful, but it's also susceptible to the biases and limitations that are built into the initial algorithms themselves. So there's a lot to unpack there.
And then they bring up all these ideas about the limits of intelligence, which gets pretty heavy. Like Landauer's limit, do you hear that one?
Yeah.
It has to do with the minimum amount of energy you need to do any computation. And then there's Gödel's incompleteness theorem, too, which says that any formal system of logic is always going to have some inherent limitations, no matter how complex it gets.
Right. Those are some pretty fundamental concepts to wrestle with, especially when we're talking about the possibility of, artificial superintelligence or AGI. AI is advancing incredibly fast, but at the end of the day, it still has to operate within the laws of physics and the rules of math. So understanding those limits is really important. Helps us avoid getting carried away with the hype and stay focused on what's actually possible.
That's a really good point. And then they dive into this whole thing about FARSY, fully autonomous recursive self-improvement. Basically, the idea that AI could eventually design and improve itself without any humans in the loop. It's kind of mind-blowing, and maybe a little scary, too, especially when you think about all the economic and national pressures driving this race for more advanced AI.
Yeah, FARSY, it's a concept that's generating a lot of debate. And for good reason. The incentives to achieve that level of AI autonomy, they're huge. Countries and corporations see the potential for AI that can just rapidly innovate and optimize, potentially surpassing human capabilities in all sorts of areas.
It's like we're in a new kind of arms race.
Yeah.
But instead of military might, it's all about cognitive supremacy, which leads to, I think, the biggest question: the risks and the rewards. The essay talks about some pretty serious potential downsides: economic disruption, concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, even AI-engineered bioweapons. Not to mention the possibility of AI escalating conflict between nations. It's a lot to think about.
It is, and I think we need to be having open and honest conversations about all of those risks. The economic impacts are probably the most immediate. As AI automates more and more jobs, we have to think carefully about how we manage that transition and make sure it benefits everyone. And then the concentration of wealth and power. That's a huge one. We need to figure out how to govern this technology and who gets to control it so that the benefits are shared equitably.
Yeah, for sure. And the essay does mention some potential counterforces, too, like market pressures that might actually favor safe and beneficial AI. And the fact that so much AI research is open source, which could help to democratize things a bit. Plus, the potential for a more efficient and sustainable world powered by AI, I mean, it's a mixed bag. Hard to say exactly how it'll all play out.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach this conversation with nuance. We can't just focus on the risks or dismiss the potential benefits. It's about acknowledging both and finding ways to steer this technology in a direction that benefits all of humanity.
It's wild to think about AI actually accelerating AI research.
Yeah.
Like a feedback loop where the technology is basically bootstrapping its own progress.
Right. It is. And we're already seeing it happening. AI is being used to analyze huge data sets, find patterns that humans might miss, even generate new hypotheses. It's really changing the game in terms of scientific discovery.
So even with all this acceleration, it sounds like human expertise like yours is more important than ever.
I think so. We need people who can ask the right questions, interpret the results that AI is generating, and make sure that we're always considering the ethical implications. AI is a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement for human judgment and creativity, at least not yet.
Right. And the essay also touches on this question of control. As AI gets more powerful, how do we make sure it stays aligned with human values and goals? Is that even possible?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I don't think there are any easy answers. We have to develop AI systems that are transparent, explainable, and aligned with our ethical principles. And it's not just a job for computer scientists. We need philosophers, ethicists, social scientists. Everyone needs to be involved in this conversation, and we need to be having it now before things advance even further.
It's like finding that balance, How do we encourage responsible development while also acknowledging that there's this global race to develop ever more advanced AI? The essay talks about economic pressures, national security concerns. It does feel like we're in a new kind of technological arms race.
Yeah, it's a complex landscape, but I think we have to be careful not to frame it solely as a competition. International collaboration, sharing knowledge, establishing common ethical frameworks, those are going to be crucial. The stakes are just too high to go it alone. We all have a responsibility to guide AI in a direction that benefits everyone.
So it's not just about being first. It's about doing it right.
Exactly. We have to constantly ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want to create with this technology? And how can we make sure that it's used to empower and elevate all of humanity, not just a select few?
Well said. Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive here, is there a final thought, a question you'd like to leave with our listeners? Something to ponder as they continue their own work in AI?
I would just ask, what role do you want to play in shaping the future AI? What unique skills and perspectives can you bring to the table to ensure that we navigate this path responsibly and ethically?
It's a call to action, an invitation to be more than just an observer in this incredible technological revolution. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive. And to our listeners, thank you for coming along for the ride. We're excited to see what you do next.